I didn't believe him for a second. When Ranger Cole's sunken eyes locked onto mine, I waved him off and told him I'd be fine. 2 hours on a loop, how could anything go wrong? A half-mile down the Blackwood path, I was already kicking myself for not listening. I was chasing silence. I don't hate people. I just hate the noise they bring. Out there, amid gnarly pines and mossy stones, there's nothing but your own heartbeat and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. No, it lines pinging, no group texts lighting up your phone. Just you, the trees, and the wind weaving through needles overhead. I'd heard about this trail on a dusty online forum. One guy swore it was abandoned. Another swore he saw something not right past sundown. No official write-ups, no cell signal, and barely any footprints in the mud. Perfect. I left the tiny gas station at 3:15 p.m., my beat-up Subaru loaded with water, bananas, and a headlamp I was 99% sure I wouldn't need. When I reached the unmarked lot, the gravel crunch echoed like a warning. Cole was standing near the signpost, one of those flimsy wooden things that could tip over in a stiff breeze. He didn't introduce himself. He just stared, arms folded, like he already knew no one would heed his warning. "You here for a sunset stroll?" he asked, voice flat. "Just a quick loop," I said. "I'll be back before dark." He didn't nod, didn't smile. He just shook his head, slow and heavy. "Not wildlife," he said. "Not weather. The woods, they change at night. You don't want to be in there when that happens." Then he turned and walked back toward the peeling ranger shack. I watched him go, paused, then shrugged and clipped my car locked. Adventure calls. The first 10 minutes were textbook. Dappled sunlight through needles, birds flitting between branches, my boots crunching on pine cones and brittle leaves. I settled into a rhythm. Inhale the fresh smell of sap, exhale the week's worth of emails still buzzing in my head. 2 miles in, I realized I hadn't checked my watch and grinned. This was exactly why I came. And then the silence hit. It swallowed the birdsong. It sucked the breeze right out of the treetops. My steps went from crispy to muted, the forest floor feeling like velvet underfoot. I looked up. The pines were taller here, their trunks warped and narrow, like giant ribs rising from the earth. None of them moved, no breeze, no creaking, just absolute suffocating stillness. At first I blamed my imagination. Then I heard it, a soft hiss halfway between wind and voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a low susurration that crept under my skin. "Hello," I called out, louder than I meant to. My voice sounded foreign in the quiet. No answer, just the hiss, whisper, rumble. I pressed on, heart twinging. 20 minutes in, the trail bent around a cluster of trees, and I nearly tripped over the circle. 7 flat stones, slick with moss, arranged in a perfect ring 10 feet across. Each stone bore shallow carvings, angular scratches that could have been runes if you squinted, or just vandal marks left too long to fade. I froze. The whispering sharpened, like words on the edge of hearing. It felt unwelcoming, like I'd stumbled into someone's private chamber. My gut clenched. Maybe Ranger Cole wasn't an overcautious guardrail after all. Well, my watch said 5:42 p.m. 2 hours before sundown, maybe 3. I shook my head. "Just 2 more minutes," I muttered, though I had no plan except retracing my steps. I swallowed. The air felt thick, every breath pulling in more of that strange hum. I skirted the stones and tried to pick up the trail markers, but the path had narrowed. Roots snaked across the earth like veins, and the moss swallowed my footprints. I paused for water, no sound but my own. Gulping breath. I raised my head, and for a heartbeat thought I saw movement, a pale flash between 2 trees. I spun, but there was nothing. Just gray bark and dappled light. I exhaled and kicked at a pebble, frustration pricking in my chest. I needed landmarks, something familiar. But every tree looked the same. Every rock, every fallen log, every mossy patch. My phone was dead, GPS marking me with an unlit screen. I cursed under my breath, wishing I'd brought more daylight. The sky above was turning a dull gray, the sun sinking behind a curtain of branches I couldn't see through. Then came the crack. Snap. A thin branch under weight, maybe, except no one was supposed to be here. My pulse quickened. Snap, crunch, snap. Pacing me, it sounded. "Hey, if someone's there, speak up." My shout echoed off unseen walls of wood. Silence answered. The whisper became a melody, faint but deliberate. A lullaby. It had rhythm, a cadence. It felt intimate, like something was calling my name or copying the rhythm of my heartbeat. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam stabbing into the gloom. I stumbled over roots, tripping, nearly dropping it. The beam landed on a shape, tall, impossibly thin, half hidden behind a pine, pale as bone, no face, just a smooth expanse where features should be. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stood watching. I clicked the flashlight harder, sure it was a trick of bark and shadow. The thing's head tilted, and I could swear. Its mouth opened, letting that lullaby slip into my ears. I didn't stay to question sanity. I ran. Branches whipped at my arms, thorns snagged my jacket. The melody chased me, rising and falling as if coaxing me deeper. I darted left, right, trying to break eye contact, but the forest played tricks. I passed the same twisted pine 3 times, its trunk split down the middle like a screaming face. My lungs burned. Every footstep felt slower than the last. I closed my eyes for a second, too long. When I opened them, I was back by the stones, only I never turned that way. The carvings glinted in my flashlight's beam, and the melody throbbed, pulsing like a heartbeat. No, I panted. No, no, no. I dropped my pack, chest heaving. I didn't care about the water or that spare battery pack. I just needed to get out. I sprinted downhill, vision blurred, adrenaline jangling my bones. Lights up ahead, thank God. My Subaru parked under that broken floodlight. I bolted for it, nearly tripping on a root, certain the thing was right behind me. But the ranger shack, it was wrong. Boards nailed across windows, paint so faded it looked bleached by decades of neglect. Cobwebs draped the porch. I banged on the door, nothing. Through a crack, dusty shelves stared back. No ranger coal, no gear, no evidence anyone had been here in years. I froze as the forest edge shivered. Every pine trunk erupted into shifting arc cracking open like jaws revealing pale slivers beneath. Hundreds of them, all humming in perfect unison. I fumbled with my keys, hands slick. I slammed inside, doors locked, and gunned the engine. As I peeled out, headlights slicing through looming trunks, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror, that gaunt, eyeless shape, standing in the middle of the path, waving. The lullaby drifting through the trees. It's been 3 days. I haven't slept more than an hour at a time. My apartment's quiet, but I still hear it sometimes. The soft hum of pines, a lullaby echoing under my skin. Yesterday I walked past the park near my building. No pines there before, but now there's one. And tonight I'm pretty sure it's humming. I woke up in a cold sweat, heart pounding so hard I half expected the holler of dead pine to follow me into my dreams. The morning light was gray through my blinds, and for a moment everything felt normal, except that choking knot of fear in my chest wouldn't loosen. I forced myself out of bed, telling myself it was over. I'd packed up, driven straight home, and told no one the whole story, but the forest had come with me. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself. The single pine sapling by the edge of my sidewalk, its needles drooping in perfect mimicry of the giants back in Blackwood. I pressed my palm against its bark, so smooth, so impossibly fresh, and felt a faint vibration. A hum. There was no wind. No one else in the block, just that low melody dancing beneath my skin. I shook it off, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection until I recognized the pale, haunted eyes staring back. I'd promised myself I'd never go back, but that sapling was a constant reminder that whatever I'd unleashed on dead pine was still alive, and maybe even following me. 2 days later, I found myself at the thrift store down the street, rifling through old topographic maps and guidebooks. I knew the last thing I needed was more maps of the same cursed path, but I was desperate. The sapling was growing, already 4 inches tall, its roots lightly cracking the concrete. I needed a plan. A battered field guide fell open at a section on anomalous woodlands, weird chapter, rarely skimmed by most hikers. I paged through accounts of living forests, trees that moved, whispered, even hunted unwary travelers. I felt sick, but reading it was oddly comforting. I wasn't insane. Others had seen this too. One entry mentioned a ritual, no kitschy stones or chanting, just an act of deliberate unmaking. Felling the first sprout, cutting it back before its roots took hold, destroy its anchor, and perhaps the larger presence would retreat. That evening, armed with a small hatchet and a bottle of rubbing alcohol to burn the cut, I walked down my street under the pale glow of street lamps. The sapling stood at the curb lie. A sentry. My boots crunched on gravel as I approached, heart in my throat. I swung the hatchet once, slicing through slender bark. The hum stopped, cold, surgical silence, then hissed back, furious, like a wounded animal. I took a deep breath and swung again. The sapling toppled with an almost human wail in my mind, and I doused the stump in alcohol, setting it alight. Flames curled around the roots until the wood turned black and crumbled. I stood back, muscles trembling. Nothing happened for a long, breathless minute, just the faint smell of smoke and the low hum fading into the distance. Relief and terror fought in my chest. If the guide was right, maybe that severed its outpost. But did it weaken or enrage the thing in the woods? I didn't stick around to find out. Over the next 24 hours, sleep barely touched me. Every car door slam, every distant siren sent adrenaline pinging through my veins. My phone buzzed with texts from friends asking if I was okay. I texted back that I'd been stressed, maybe caught a bug, no mention of stones or faceless figures. Then, just before dawn, I felt it, ailing in the air, dragging the night behind it. I sat bolt upright on my couch, coffee untouched on the table beside me, as the hum swelled through my walls. It wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a chorus, louder than my blood in my ears. It filled every crack, every vent, the floorboards under my feet vibrating with its cadence. I had no choice. I grabbed my keys, loaded my car, headlamp, hatchet, field guide, and a heavy-duty flashlight, and drove north again before the sky could ever hint at morning. The road was empty, the map guiding me back to that forgotten lot. Every mile brought my pulse higher, every turn tightened the knot in my gut. I'd ignored my own instincts once. I wouldn't let that happen again. When I arrived, the lot was deserted just like last time. Gravel underfoot, floodlight. Liquoring in the gloom, I checked my watch, 4:10 a.m., but there was no sun, only the shadow-thick forest ahead. I inhaled, exhaled, and locked the car. From a distance, the ranger shack looked the same boarded-up ruin. I passed it without a thought, heading for the stones. I half expected the trail to warp before me, but it was unchanged, roots tangled across the path, the hush pressing in. I clicked on my flashlight. Its beam carved a tunnel of white through the black. 30 minutes? Later, I reached the circle of stones. Moonlight filtered through skeletal branches, and the carvings glowed pale. I held up the flashlight, studying the runes. They weren't random. They formed a pattern, a spiral winding inward. I traced them with my eyes, feeling a pull like gravity. I remembered something else from the field guide. If you rearranged stones, you could break the flow of an animating force. You didn't need to understand the symbols. You just had to interrupt their geometry. My blood ran cold. My fingers trembled as I lifted the smallest stone, slick with dew, and carried it 2 feet away, placing it haphazardly. Immediately the forest shuddered. The hush ripped into a roar, a hurricane of sound and pressure. I covered my ears but could still hear it. The stone's carved face, faintly illuminated, starting to glow with an otherworldly light. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The runes on the remaining stones flared, and the hush detonated into that melody, warped, distorted, enraged. Then the ground beneath me vibrated, dust fell from the trees. The shadows between the trunks twisted, coalescing into something tall and wrong, limbs bending at unnatural angles, bark peeling away like skin. I didn't wait. I sprinted, adrenaline snapping me forward. Branches clawed at my clothes, roots scrambled for my ankles. I heard the snapping, closer, furious snapping, like hundreds of branches breaking all at once. Hissing me through the gloom, and then I broke free. The lot opened before me, the ranger shack looming, empty and silent. I didn't stop to look back. I leaped into my car, slamming the door as the melody crescendoed one last time before cutting off, dead silent. Wheels spun on gravel as I peeled away, headlights carving rectangles of black that swallowed my view. In the rearview mirror, I thought I saw the tallest pines lean toward each other, low branches rustling. Finally. After all that moving, I drove until dawn chased the stars away. When I finally pulled into my apartment parking lot, exhaustion crashed over me like a wave. I wanted to believe it was over, that rearranging one stone and burning a sapling had been enough. But the echo of that melody still thrummed through my bones. Inside, I dropped the field guide on my coffee table, opened it to that chapter on anomalous woodlands, and scrawled 3 words across the margin. Not over yet. Because I knew better. The forest was biding its time, and so was I. I'd done something that would make it angry, but maybe give me the clue I needed. Next time, I go in prepared for more than a hatchet and borrowed lore. I go in to finish what I started, and the thing in the trees would know I was coming. I spent the next morning poring over topographic maps and aerial photos, marking every contour line and ridge I could find around the trailhead. If the forest was shifting, I needed fixed points, something the trees couldn't rearrange. I traced the old fire tower to the east, the collapsed bridge by the creek, and a cluster of granite outcrops to the west. Then I plotted a straight line between them, a makeshift bearing that would, I hoped, guide me past the dead zone where GPS failed. I also dug up gear. Beyond my battered headlamp and hatchet, I packed a handheld compass, a roll of surveyor's tape to flag real land, Mux, and a small handheld drone charged and ready. I tossed in a camera with extra batteries. If something wanted to chase me off, I wanted evidence. Finally, I slipped the field guide into a waterproof sleeve and stashed it in my pack's hip pocket, ready for quick reference. By the time I climbed into my car, the sun was just brushing the horizon. The road wound north in a ribbon of blacktop, then crunched into gravel leading to the unmarked lot. My watch read Fort. NTAM. No birds, no dawn chorus, just silence thick as fog. I stepped out, heart hammering, not with fear this time, but a fierce focus. I was going back in, and I had a plan. I bypassed the boarded ranger shack, still a ruin, and set off on what I now called the true trail. I clipped surveyor's tape to the first pine, the bark narrow and still. Just beyond, the circle of stones waited. The moonlight made the carvings look like veins radiating outward. I paused, thumb hovering over the smallest flag, then kept walking. I'd learned that direct interference might only anger whatever lived here. 20 minutes in, the forest swallowed me again. The hush settled like a weight on my shoulders. My compass needle barbed, wavering, until I shook it free. I clipped a length of tape on a branch and moved on, counting paces between flags so I could retrace my steps if things went sideways. My drone beeped low on my belt. A final check. I flipped its switch. The propellers sliced air in a hum unlike any forest noise, and I guided it upward until its LED light formed a pinpoint in the canopy. It gave me a view of wending trunks, a patchwork of gray and black. No obvious loops, no open clearings, just a sea of identical pines. I landed the drone gently back into my pack and pressed deeper. My breath made small clouds in the frigid morning air. My boots sank into moss so thick it felt like walking on a sponge. Then I heard it, the faint melody, softer than a heartbeat, drifting around me. I froze, not fear this time. Curiosity edged in. "Show yourself," I whispered. No answer, just that lullaby curling through the woods. I clicked on my camera's night setting and lifted it, lens trained past the trees. My finger hovered over the record button. The melody grew stronger, weaving patterns I almost recognized from my own dreams. 20 minutes later, I found the gran. It outcrops I'd spotted on the map. They rose from the moss like the prow of a ship, cold gray stone etched with fissures. I clipped another flag and sat against one of the boulders, knees to my chest, camera rolling. I spoke softly into the mic. "I'm 5 flags in. It's almost 5 a.m. The melody, it's definitely here. I can hear it, but I can't make out words. It feels like a warning." No response. The wind, if it was wind, rattled through needles above but left the trunks perfectly still. I stepped away and followed a narrow hollow that angled downhill, aiming back toward the creek. The air grew warmer. The scent of damp earth and decaying needles rose in my nostrils. Then I saw it, the broken bridge. Old timbers sagged into the water, black with rot. My heart leapt. This was my western landmark, the one point I trusted. I clipped my final piece of tape on a nearby pine and studied the water, oily black, still as glass. I knelt, cupped my hands, and splashed cold water on my face. The reflection wavered, not mine, something more elongated, pale, just beyond the edge of the bank. I spun with my camera aloft. Nothing, mere shadow. But the melody surged like a wave, pressing in around me. I swallowed hard. This was the moment I'd planned for, facing the heart of whatever lived here, at the lowest, dampest place it could gather. I set the camera to record, then unscrewed the top of my field guide. Under anomalous woodlands, I found the bit I'd memorized. You don't face it in numbers, you face it in silence. The forest feeds on fear, but it recoils from unblinking calm. I closed the guide and took a steadying breath. Then I stepped onto the rotten planks of the bridge, every footfall a risk. Midway across, the melody shifted, softer now, more curious than hostile. I stopped, balanced mid-stride, and looked around. The pines on either side leaned in, slender trunks bending impossibly toward the creek, their needles brushing, whispering together. My pulse slowed. I raised the field guide over my head, spine cracking like a whip. The melody halted. I felt a presence behind me, nothing solid, just weight. I didn't turn. I held my ground, chest open, palms flat at my sides. A single pine needle drifted down and landed on the open page. I read the line out loud. Cannot abide the seal of intent. The words felt like ice in my lungs. I closed the guide, pressing it flat, and whispered, I come with purpose. I seek truth. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the forest exhaled. The logs beneath my boots groaned like an old man's sigh. The melody returned, softer still, and the leaning pines straightened, slowly, inexorably receding from the bridge. The hush didn't thicken. It lifted, as if the trees had parted to let me pass. I crossed to the far bank and let the camera sweep back across the clearing, capturing every writhing trunk and mossy root. Then I turned and ran, sure-footed this time, back toward the lot, following my flags in reverse order. The first great pine loomed. I unwrapped the tape, collected it, and slipped my camera off record. The melody had vanished altogether, replaced by the faint whisper of wind. When I emerged under the busted floodlight, dawn was breaking. Pale pink light streaked the sky. The ranger shack sat silent, but somehow less ominous than before. I exhaled, leaning against my car. What? Shing sunlight filter into the woods, every trunk now rigid, every branch sparkling with dew. In the days since I've reviewed the footage, nothing too dramatic, just the forest breathing, the pines leaning, then straightening. But I heard it, recorded that lullaby, shifting from menacing to tentative. I still hear it sometimes, echoing in my dreams, but it's quieter now, like an actor waiting backstage. I know I've been marked by these woods, but I also know they've let me leave on my own terms, so I wait. I study the runes, I chart my bearings, I prepare, because I know one day I'll go back for the final answer, and when I do, it won't be fear I bring. It will be intent. I spent the next few days rebuilding my courage and my gear. I added a small sat phone, a pocket radio tuned to the ranger frequency, even though I knew there was no ranger to answer, and a lightweight pruning saw, just enough to cut through thin saplings in a pinch. Every cough made me jump. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like dead pine reaching through my walls. But I knew I had to go back once more to seal the deal and stop the forest from spreading any further. That morning, I parked on the same cracked gravel, heart thundering in my chest. Dawn was barely a pale promise on the horizon. I strapped on my pack and checked my compass one last time. 4 flags west, 5 flags east, a broken bridge and a fire tower. Those were my lifelines. I clicked on my headlamp and plunged into the hush. The moss swallowed my boots immediately. No birds, no wind. Even the saplings seemed to bow as I passed. My breath puffed out in white clouds. I clipped the first flag just past the stone circle and slipped a small loop of bright orange tape around the next flag farther in. Each ribbon felt like a vow. I would not be lost. I would finish this. As I drew near the granite outcrops, the lullaby began again, soft. Urious, I paused, closed my eyes, and let it wash over me. This time it felt different, closer to a question than a threat. I pulled out my recorder and murmured, I'm here, I know you're listening. The melody stuttered, then rose in a gentle crescendo, as if the forest were hesitating. I edged forward until the boulders loomed overhead, their surfaces slick with dew. I pressed my palm against the cold stone and whispered, I come with respect. I won't cut and run. I want to understand. And behind me, the trees sighed. My compass spun a moment before settling north again. I exhaled and pressed deeper, following the hollow path toward the creek. The broken bridge came into view under the ghostly light, its rotten planks gagged in the water. I set down my pack and propped the pruning saw against a rock. Heart pounding, I knelt and unsheathed the saw. I cut a notch in one of the crooked saplings that had sprung up along the bank, tiny but unmistakably part of the same breed as the circle stones. As the blade bit into wood, the melody shivered, and the air grew thick, like gravity had doubled. I paused, then cut clean through. The sapling snapped, and in that instant, every pine around the creek seemed to inhale. Silence slammed into me. The moss stilled. Even the water stopped flowing. I swear I saw the creek freeze in mid-swirl. Then, slowly, there was a sound like distant thunder, the wilderness itself rearranging. Branches shifted. Roots crept across the ground, pines bent, forming a vaulted arch over the creek. It felt deliberate, like an invitation or a test. My fingers went numb on the saw, but I remained still, watching the living cathedral of wood above me. Suddenly, a voice, a child's whisper, impossibly sweet, floated through the trees. "Why do you come again?" My breath caught. "To help," I whispered back, though I didn't entirely believe it. "To stop it spreading." The hush broke. All the pines around the creek snapped. Direct, needles quivering in a silent applause. The child's voice giggled, echoing off the rocks. "Then seal the path." I looked down at the field guide in my lap. On the page I'd dog-eared, beneath a sketch of twisted roots, I saw a phrase I hadn't noticed before: "Bind that which grows beyond its place." I realized it meant not just cutting saplings, but binding the source, the stones themselves. I rose, heart hammering, and crossed the bridge, careful of broken planks. Back. At the circle, the stones glowed faintly in the pre-dawn gloom. The carvings pulsed in time with my pulse. I knelt by the largest stone in the north and wrapped my pruning saw blade in surveyor's tape, binding metal to stone. Then I knelt by the southern stone and tied the other end of the same tape around it, pulling tight between the two. As the tape stretched, the carvings along each stone's face began to fade, as if worn down by time in moments. The lullaby warbled, distorted, then broke into shattering silence. The forest tasted it, and in response branches overhead snapped, raining pine needles. My ears rang. I held my breath and closed my eyes. When I opened them, the stones lay dull and gray. The tape lay slack, powerless. The hush was gone, replaced by the tentative patter of drip, drip, drip as dew fell. Birds, real birds, burst into song above. A breeze stirred, and for the first time the pines swayed. I exhaled, staggering to my feet. My leg trembled, but I felt a fierce joy. The source was quelled, the melody ended. I gathered my flags, my saw, my recorder, proof or souvenir of a forest that almost claimed me. I walked back to my car under open sky. No twisted pines reached for me. No lullaby followed. When I climbed into the driver's seat, dawn broke fully, golden light flooding the lot. I sat for a moment, letting tears slip, not just in relief, but in awe. I'd bargained with a living Orist, and won not by fighting, but by listening and choosing respect. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The boarded ranger shack looked empty and ordinary. The gravel road stretched north without detour. And somewhere beyond the trees, the forest breathed freely again, wild but contained. I don't know if I'll ever return, but I've told the story to a few trusted friends. Maybe one day, a proper ranger team will survey Dead Pine Trail and mark it safe. Maybe someone will replace that sapling at my sidewalk with a rosebush. But if you ever find yourself lost among silent pines, remember, sometimes the deepest magic asks not for fire or steel, but for a willingness to understand, and the courage to bind it back into its place. The highway stretched out before me like a ribbon of black glass, the miles slipping away under the glow of my headlights. I glanced one last time in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a pale shape leaning into the glass, humming that twisted lullaby. But there was nothing, only the curve of the road and the dark reach of trees beyond. Back in my apartment, I unpacked my gear slowly, methodically. The pruning saw went into a locked toolbox. The field guide slipped onto a high shelf, pages uncreased. I placed the camera and recorder in a drawer, silent keepsakes of a place few would ever believe. On the windowsill, I set a small pot of time, something ordinary and harmless, to replace the blackened stump that had once sprouted at my doorstep. That night, sleep came easily. My dreams were quiet places of sunlit glades and chirping sparrows. No more humming, no more eyes in the bark, just the steady rhythm of my own pulse, unaccompanied. In the days that followed, I kept the story close, sharing it only with people I trusted. My friends listened, half amazed, half alarmed, but I could see the doubt flicker in their eyes. They asked if I'd lost it, if burnout on that remote trail had finally tipped me over the edge. I simply shook my head, offered them coffee, and turned the conversation to work or weekend plans. Some tales are too heavy to wear in the daylight. Occasionally I drive past that spot on the map, Dead Pine Trail. I keep my gaze on the road, not on the silent forest lining the highway. Sometimes, when the sun is low and the pines cast long shadows, I swear I hear a faint susurration, like wind through needles. But it's just the highway wind, or maybe my mind playing tricks. I inhale deeply, taste the crisp tang of open air, and remind myself, the trail is bound. The stones are dull. The melody is gone. Still, every now and then I find myself reaching for that bottle of rubbing alcohol in the garage or eyeing the pruning saw in the toolbox. Not out of fear, but in readiness, because even the oldest stories linger in the roots, and sometimes the forest remembers when you've forgotten. And if Ed Pine ever stirs again, I'll be waiting, intent, prepared, and no longer alone in that hush.